Hello, party people. Today, I'm going to be unboxing a couple of cards I got from Mr. Hot Crypto. Bought a few inefficient but high-density cards off of him recently. I only did this because I have a location coming up this winter where I can mine on these for at least 8 hours a day with zero power cost. So normally people would be ditching 3090s and 3080 Ti's right now, but they're kind of what I'm after. So I'm going to get these unboxed. We're going to get them slotted into a rig with a mining motherboard, do a little bit of testing on them, maybe PMD them because I don't have any PMD results for a 3090 or a 3080 Ti, and we'll kind of go from there. But let's get these unboxed. They are not all EVGAs. One is a Tough with a GH apparently, ASUS. One's a Ventus 3X 3090 and the other one is a 3090 FE. So let's get them out of the box, see what we're working with. Well, sure enough, that is a Ventus 3X. Sorry, she's a chunker. And yep, 3090, 24 gig OC. This is a pretty clean little card. Fans feel really good. If they were run at high speed, they have not been run at high speed for long. MSI fans kind of suck, especially the inner ones where the card is the hottest. So it looks like they've been wiped down a little bit, but honestly, everything looks pretty good in there. A little bit of dust. The thermal pads look stock and okay. I don't see any major leakage or anything like that. Oh yeah, it still has a warranty sticker on it, so you know it hasn't been opened. But yeah, only dual 8s, which is great. Looks like one's got a little chip out of it, but not a big deal. So that'll be a nice little card. Set that up to the side. We'll see what we're working with next. Here we have the ASUS Tough TOU GH. Oh, she's a little dustier. I'm pretty sure Hawk had this one running for 9 months. So honestly, all things considered, mining through a summer, and his facility is, it's got filters, but that's about it. So I probably won't even bother to swab it. Oh, we got some rust. I probably won't even bother to swap them down. This thing looks good enough. This is a 3080 Ti. And this definitely has newer pads on it, which is good. The Tough pads are junk. Absolutely junk. So, card looks relatively clean. I'll take it. These have the same memory bus width as a 3090, so they mine pretty much the same as a 3090. And la pièce de résistance, the EVGA, kidding, 3090 FE with some super shit hot custom cooling. Check that out, huh? So GDDR6X cards do get really hot, and it looks like it's definitely been repadded. The screw cap things are not in the right spots. Oh well, doesn't matter to me. Thing looks intact. It's been nicely wiped down. Some care was given. Just a big old chunk boy of a card. So yeah, I also have one more 3080 Ti EVGA XC that's coming. Coolers on those are really not great. Won't be dealing with that tonight, but I do want to get these 3 on a frame and do some testing. See how the pads look, see how they perform, see what kind of bins we're working with, and get the test bench, not the test bench, but get the actual frame set up with a power supply to fit all these other cards in it because it's going up north with me. And I'm going to leave it behind at our cabin where the power rate's 5 cents a kilowatt hour after taxes and fees, which is excellent. That'll be just a little bit better than break even if you were paying for power, but again, I won't be paying for power because it's an electric heat facility, and right now the thermostats are broken, so they're running the electric heat 24/7, and it's actually going to be cheaper for them to let me mine 8 hours a day and provide that heat than it would be for them to heat it with electricity. So win-win. Come spring, these will all be coming back, and hopefully the market's a little bit better by then. I imagine we'll be bottoming still later this year. But yeah, let's get the frame out, and then I'll get a motherboard, a power supply or 2 potentially, and we'll see what we can get done here. Here she is, the open frame of magnificence. Back when I started mining, these were not cheap. These were $60 or $70. Now they're way cheap, but if you order them with fans, they're still not too far off of that, and the fans are very helpful, so I think it's worth spending the few extra bucks for the kit. That being said, this is the frame I'm going to use. It's technically a 12 GPU, but I'm going to use it for, I'm going to set it up like I'm mining with 6 or maybe 8. Probably set this up with just 6 cards. But yeah, I have the standoffs already in. Looks like I'll just be using these 4 probably. The motherboard I'm going to be using is actually down there. It is a B75 8 GPU mining motherboard. I do need to confirm that it boots and shuts down correctly. I think I had that motherboard in a rig last winter and it booted and ran just fine, but when you shut it down in software, it hung. So I just want to make sure it isn't that board. If it is, I have a spare 12 GPU as well. All right, there's the board. I do already have a YouTube video on this board covering it, so I'm not going to touch on it right now, but definitely go look at the B75 mining motherboard if you're curious. It's a really, really cool board. So that's installed. I will be running half the fans plugged into the fan header on the board, which is up by the CPU. I thought it had 2 fan headers, but I guess not. And then the other ones I'll be running off of Molex. But let me unwrap. I have a brand new EVGA 1200 Platinum, I think, power supply. I don't care as much about efficiency since it's going to be up north. I do have a titanium as well, but I think I'm going to keep that down here as a spare. All right, so 80 plus Platinum is the same efficiency as titanium, up to 50% load, but it gets worse between 50 and 100. I really like 1200 watt power supplies because I typically do run these on 110 volts AC, and the smart plugs I use are limited to 1200 watts RMS, and that's really all you should be pulling as an 80% rule from a 15 amp outlet anyway, so these are kind of perfect when it comes to that whole setup. If you're running more than one PSU or more wattage than this, you really should be running a second power cord and using another circuit if you're on 110, 15. So if you got a 20 amp circuit, you could run potentially 2, much smaller power supply, obviously, on a 20 amp circuit. If you're running on 240, no issue at all. You could run 2 of these full tilt on a 20 amp 240, not even get close. Anyway, let me plug in the necessary cables to the back of this, slot it in the frame, and then we can start looking at mounting a couple of GPUs and firing it up just to see how this runs. All right, I don't want to get too far along before I take another clip here. So I just got the motherboard and power supply in. That's it. I wanted to boot it up. I did have an SSD kicking around that's had Hive on it with a worker name that I recognized. Plugged it in, fired it up, and right now it's updating. So I'm going to wait until that updates, and then we'll look at the idle power of this motherboard CPU combo. I think it's 35 watts. Hopefully it's less, but we'll see. Then I'm going to plug in these fans here and see how much power 620 mil fans take. All right, so looks like 25 to 30 watts. Let's plug in those fans. I think it's 10 watts. I think the CPU is doing stuff. All right, so I'm going to finish grabbing the rest of the PCIe power connectors. I believe this comes with 4 daisy chain and 2 non-daisy chain, hopefully. I would like to change them all out to daisy chains, but I'll see what I have for spare cables. I was wrong. It comes with 2 daisy chains and 4 single 8s. So I did have 2 more spare 8-pin daisy chains, but I threw 2 of the original single 8s on there. I'm going to shut this down now. I'm going to feed it one 3090 to start with. I'm going to hook it up with the PMD, which is the Elmore Labs power measuring device, and we'll do some testing with it. But I do need to get the Hive OS version up to date. It's kind of fighting me right now. And I'm also going to tidy up the SSD, the fan wires, and the motherboard power, because that's not going to need to move. All right, some basic cable management. So I've got the PMD fed with the single dedicated direct 8-pin, and then my worst daisy chain. So let me just hook up these 2 to the power splitter adapter boy for the FEs. And let's get this thing fired up. Uh-oh. Do we have short circuit protection kicking in? I wonder if that daisy chain's not compatible. No idea. It's the riser. Thank goodness. Got the PMD chooch in here. I'm going to have to retry those two daisy chains that I had plugged in. I thought they were incompatible, but they might actually be okay. So let me get this booted in. I'm going to go over to a computer. I'm going to make sure it's up to date. I'm going to come back and we'll do some numbers hashing. It's already drawing some power for sure. Okay, it was too out of date to update on its own, so I'm doing a hive replace stable. That should be pretty quick. I was noticing this card's already drawing 100 watts idle, which is ridiculous. But yeah, we'll get some power numbers and some hash rates as soon as this is done. All right, so there's ETC hash, and that's at 2600 mem, 1125 core. I'm gonna drop it back down to 1095 core. Once I got above 2600 memory, it actually started getting slower. It was at 121, but 123.1 is really good. We're showing 287 software power. Oh wow, okay, so 307, that's a lot. Let me dump the core a little bit and see if we can get that a little lower. Okay, so we're down to 300 watts at the plug. We're showing 285 software, 121 still for hash rate, which is really good. I'm going to dump the core a little bit more before we move on to other algos. Okay, looks like we're going to even out at like 115. It shows 277 power. We're at 293 on the PMD, which is tolerable. The temperatures are surprisingly good. But yeah, we're at 60% fixed fan speed, but obviously this thing has breathing room. Got a fan blowing out the front here and straight through in the back. Not terribly warm in my house either, so I think we'll probably call that good for an OC. 115, I don't know. It's probably worth the extra 10 watts to go up to 120, but if I'm going to be running 4 cards, we'll see. So I'd say final OCs 2600 mem, 1095 core. Seems to really like that. Anything more on the mem, it didn't like it at all. So let's move on to Ergo, because it's a similar overclock. Okay, here we have Auto Lycos, which is Ergo. I tried lowering the core a little bit, but this algo isn't fully memory like ETC and ETH hash. So far, it seems to be actually better efficiency if we leave it at 1095, 2600. We were getting 207 watts at the PMD, and we were getting 223 megahash per second on Auto Lycos. I dropped it to 925 core, we got down to 195 megahash, but we were still pulling 195 watts at the PMD. So coming up again a little bit, you can see there 212.84, 199 software. And the software is reading about 10 watts low, so we're got 209 on the PMD right now. Not going to leave this running too much, but there's the hash rates. Let's move on to Ravencoin, since that uses some memory as well. All right, here's Kapow. We're doing 58.26 mega hash, and we are pulling 335 watts software. We're pulling 355 watts PMD. So this card seems to really ignore the riser. That's pulling about 20 watts. PCIe 1 is drawing about 100 watts, and the rest of the power is actually coming from PCIe 2. It's a little bit surprising that it's that split. So this cable right here, it's actually the one that goes into the top of the card, is drawing about twice as much power as the one below it. So if you have a dedicated line, that's why we do this research too. I'm actually going to mark this one. So this will probably get its own dedicated power from the PSU, and the other one can be on a splitter. Doesn't matter too much. But yeah, we're getting 354 watts. I'm going to dump the core a little bit to 1000, and we will see how much of a hit we take on hash rate. So that's still a lot of power. We dropped about 5 mega hash. More than that, actually. So again, 1095 is a good setting for the core. Wow, these are thirsty cards. You couldn't even run 4 of these on a 1200 watt power supply. That's incredible. All right, next up, let's try Flux, which is, I think, Zel hash, which is an Equihash 125-4 variant algorithm. Okay, here we have Flux. We're at about 92 souls. Software is showing 240 watts, and it's really jumping, especially PCIe 1. So we're drawing a total of 240 to 270, but it's really jumping around. We are at 1095 core, negative 2004 memory. I'm going to up the core a little bit more. So 250 to 300. We're getting 95.3 souls and climbing slightly. So that, a 1200 core, might be worth it over a 1095 core. But again, pulling the memory down, and there's a newer command line function you can do in Mini-Z where you can force the memory clock a lot lower, and on these cards that's a huge advantage. So go watch Red Panda Mining. He had a video on the 19Z4 Mini-Z release, and I believe he covered all of that as well. I'm not going to do it in this video, but when this machine actually goes out into the wild, we're at 96 souls, I might do it then. I think at some point Hive will hopefully work that into the regular overclocking GUI, because when you have to enter additional arguments, it's just kind of annoying. But anyway, that's Flux. And move on to Kaspa. I think that's my last one before we try a couple dual mining options. So here we have Kaspa, 1600 core, minus 2400 memory. Good efficiency. We're looking at 3.58 megahash per watt, 851.6 megahash, and we are looking at a software wattage of 239 watts and an actual wattage of 253, so about the same difference as Ethash. But that's still an impressive amount of hash rate localized on one card. Holy cow. So 350, it's a lot of power. We are looking at, refresh, 110 megahash on ETC and 186 on Kaspa. That's been fluctuating an awful lot, so I don't think I believe that. There we go, 121 on ETC, and I think the Kaspa hash rate will come back up. It's been in the 200 to 300s, so that's a lot more power, maybe 50 more watts, but you are getting a decent amount of Kaspa hash rate. So if you have the power supply for it, that's maybe not a bad idea. Kaspa is still GPU mineable for now. It's moving slowly to FPGA. ASICs are going to come out, and eventually GPUs will be obsoleted on this. So if you want a bag of it, dual mining is one of the best ways to do it. There we go, almost at 300 megahash. So that's pretty good. Software is reporting about 20 watts under. So this card, 10 to 20 watts more than software reads. You can be pretty confident about that. And yeah, the pin that comes in here draws about twice as much power as the pin that comes in there, on my card anyway. And the riser is 10 to 20 watts, period. Doesn't draw much. I'm going to swap over to the other 90 just to see if it performs the same, has a similar bin, and then we'll move right into the 80 Ti. I did notice a little bit of damage on that port. Turns out that little pin is actually pretty smoked, so I scraped out around the edge with a metal sim tool, and I'm hoping that I can get a little bit better contact now, because the 6-pin portion does not sit particularly flat, and that is worrying. That's as good as I'm gonna get, and I don't like it, so I'm definitely keeping an eye on that. A little bit lower power, a little bit lower hash rate. Didn't seem to change when I dropped the memory from 2500 to 26 to 25. I'll have to work with it a little bit, but the memory is definitely getting hotter. I did put some RAM sinks on the backside. They're all hot. It's just there's not enough air being scavenged away. So I think putting, the Founders Edition on the other side, moving a lot of air around it should help. But yeah, memory is at 104, which is tolerable. Ideally, I'd like a little bit less, but it shouldn't throttle until 110. So I still think we're seeing a representative sample of the card's performance. So not as good as the FE, but still not a bad card by any stretch. I can up the fan speed a little bit too, but that's not going to help much on memory. Okay, all right, fine. 80 Ti time. So here's our 80 Ti. I'm actually starting with the ETC Kaspa dual mining, just to kind of see. We're sitting at the same 350 watts, but I've got it at 1400 core, 2800 memory, so the memory bin on this card is actually really good, and we're getting excellent hash rates. Basically 120 mega hash for ETC and 416 CAS. Memory is about the same temp as the MSI, so not great, especially considering this is an all front side memory card, but considering how much power is going into that, that's actually pretty impressive. So I'm gonna dump the core down now to 1100, and let's see what we get for power. Okay, so at 1200 core and 1095, it performs about the same. You really don't leave much on the table, and you lose about 10 watts. Another Kaspa monster. Honestly, 729 mega hash, 3.74 mega hash per watt, so even better than the 3090. And this thing is drawing a cool 200 watts at the wall. The software power is almost dead on for Kaspa, which is great. So let's move on to Ergo next. We're at 1400 core, minus 2004 mem. You can see all that right here too. Holy Hannah, these things are Flux monsters. Same OC as Kaspa, 1400 core, minus 2004 memory. But this is kicking the bananas out of that 3090. I guess it's taking a little bit more power. I probably should have cranked the power up on the 3090, but look at that, 111 souls a second at 276. And frankly, that's about right. I mean, it's fluctuating all over the place. So it looks like it gets up to 300, but I don't know. I think that's settling in the 270 to 280 range. So I think that average is actually really, really pretty accurate. That is incredible. That just puts the 2080 Ti to shame. Wow, that's impressive. 0.4 is actually pretty decent efficiency too. You can get up to 0.5 with a lot of the really efficient cards. We're not talking anywhere near that kind of hash rate and density. So I'm very surprised by that. I'm going to do a little bit of a test at 1200 core just to see how it behaves, but then we'll move on. All right, so this is 1200 core. And we are down 10 watts, at least. So I can't remember. There's two power numbers. Like one I think is an average and one is real time. So if we honestly drop to 256 watts, that's significant. I think that would be, I don't know, it says the efficiency is worse. So I don't know. If you have the cooling and the power, I guess run it at 1400 core. It does seem to be slightly more efficient, even though it's drawing more power. But wow, over 100 souls even at 260 watts. That's 2080 Ti good, and these cards, nobody wants these right now. I picked this thing up for 550 bucks. You can get them for less than that too, and they're getting cheaper every day. So if you can afford the hardware, man. Wow. Okay, so at full chooch, same, does 60 mega hash at 350 watts, which actually the efficiency is a little bit better. It's about 177 kilohash per watt. However, I need to find an OC where this thing's going to be okay at under 300. So that ended up being 875 core. And I'm actually using negative 2004 mem. You can use 1000 or 2000 mem. It's going to pull the same power. It's going to be the same hash rate. So I dropped it because it doesn't seem to matter at all on this particular overclock. You can also run 900 or 925 core and then power limit it, but I don't like when OCs potentially fail. So a little bit worried about that. But yeah, this is 285 software. It's 289 at the PMD, so pretty close, and we're doing about 45 mega hash, which is honestly still pretty good. But yeah, these cards are definitely better if you can run them balls out. The efficiency gets less atrocious the hotter you run them, which is just weird. Anyway, Ergo next, then we'll finish off with ETC. Well, there we have 198 watts. It's actually 199. We got an efficiency of 1 megahash per watt, which is decent. It's fluctuating a little bit. I had a dynamic core clock. I locked it, so we're hitting 255 at 200, which is pretty okay, actually. Yeah, it's at 2800 mem, 1095 core. We dropped a little bit. However, the efficiency went up. Okay, I don't know what's going on here, but that's about right. I guess 238. I think the 3090 was giving us 233 at 200, so again, very similar to the 3090. So 285 to 287, showing 280 software, 120.4 megahash, 2800 mem, 1095 core. Just like the 3090, we can get this up a little bit higher, but this is actually pretty good efficiency for one of these GA102s. Sitting at 429. So I'm pretty happy with that. Yeah, all right. Now I'm going to put the rest of the GPUs in here. I mean, there's only going to be 3 for now, but I'm going to run the FE, then I'm going to run that MSI Ventus, and then I'm going to run the TUF. My thought process behind that is the 90 FE needs no help cooling, and it's got fans pulling against those memory heat sinks I just put on the Ventus. The Ventus core is fine, but the memory is a little toasty, so I want the 90 sandwiched, and the 80 Ti is front side memory right here, so that one will be here. And then the XC 80 Ti is going to be trash. So I'm just going to try to space them out. I'm only going to run 4 cards on this rig, which sounds ridiculous, but I'm going to max out a circuit and this power supply with just 4 of these things. So that's all I can really hope to do.